right, thank you so much, Isan. I'm just trying to share my screen. I believe you can see it now. Cool. Yep. Thank you very much. So, I'm super excited for today's webinar. I'm very happy. I'm in Gamedays. It's a topic I've always wanted to talk about. Um, so today we will be talking a little bit about how we can actually apply the concepts of game days and security chaos engineering for, for cybersecurity. Yep. A little bit about me. As Isan already mentioned, my name is Kennedy Torkura. I'm one of the founders at Mitigant and also the CTO. About my background, I have been working in cybersecurity for over 11 years. I've occupied different positions from academic research to, working in different startups in different cybersecurity and technical positions. And I'm also a member of the AWS Community Builders program. So let's get right into today's webinar. The agenda is not so much, basically just 5 points, as you can see. We're going to be looking at what game day is, just looking at it from a definition and description standpoint, and then we will describe also, we'll look at security chaos engineering. Then we will consider the topic, why should we, even as security professionals, why should we practice game days and how to go about doing it. And then I will give a short demo of what we are building in at Mitigant, our security chaos engineering platform. And as Isan already mentioned, please, if you have any questions, just bear with us. Just you can directly drop it in the chat, or you can just ask afterwards. We're gonna have a question and answer interactive session afterwards. So game days, basically, I want to start with some kind of history around game days. So basically, Jesse Robbins was a DevOps SRE professional. He worked at Amazon, and he's the person behind the whole idea of starting game days. And he was inspired by the fact that he by virtue of training, he was a firefighter. He had the experience, and he kind of was tasked with the whole being able to ensure that all the services on Amazon remain active, and they remain available regardless of all the challenges that they will have. And basically, he started the idea of game days, and which incidentally led to chaos engineering. So basically, a little bit about chaos engineering. The idea here is that you have a hypothesis, and that hypothesis might just be whatever you have as either an assumption, or you have a behavior you expect, or some kind of gut feeling that's like your hypothesis, and you take that as an input against a target system. And at the other side, you have you have your output. So you're basically observing, and you want to prove the hypothesis. You want to see whether that gut feeling, that belief you have, actually is what you see in the real world. And by being able to kind of and put this together and align what you expect and what you see in the real world, you begin to build confidence around that system. And so basically, putting this together, what game days are is you bring a couple of hypotheses and you conduct them, in a certain sequence. You come together as maybe yourself and a group of SREs or security folks or your team, and you run through all these scenarios one after the other, and you see how you can react, both from a technical standpoint, also from a communication standpoint, and also from a social standpoint, whatever matters for you to be able to perform well, to understand your system, to keep it alive, and maybe to kind of achieve your objectives. So just going back to the idea of comparing game days versus what we see in the physical world, and in this case, we are talking about incident responders, because this was kind of the motivation behind Jesse his idea for him to bring about game days, into the digital world. We know that for incident responders, they respond to emergencies, right? So they're firefighters, especially when there's an emergency, they might not really understand the nature of the emergency. They don't know whether it's going to be a big fire or a small fire, or maybe it's even a prank, right? This is something that's difficult to say beforehand. but they just have to respond, and they have to expect the worst thing to happen. And when you compare that with incident response, you observe also that, especially in security, you don't know what the threat actors are going to be. You have no idea, even if you have practiced, even if you have seen some kind of evidence in your logs, you're not really sure, but you have to prepare. And that preparation means you need to prepare for the worst. You need to prepare with every form of seriousness. And we can see that there are similarities here between what happens in the digital world and what happens in the physical world. In the midst of all this, you might be dealing with people, which might be your teammates. It might be that you're supporting another team. And when in a period when there's an incident, people are struggling to even think. People are under heavy cognitive load, and they have to make decisions. You have to make decisions. You don't have all the time to check your notes, to flip through, to check, to check what you wrote beforehand. And all these things are kind of the motivations for having game days, because during a game day, you try to simulate as closely as possible what happens in the real life, and you want to take yourself through this process, so that you can be able to see how you can react, and you can react in a way that you will achieve the objective of your objective. If it is to keep your system safe, if it is to keep your system available, if it's to ensure that all your servers, all the services are remain online. This is kind of what you do in a game day. So we see that there are a lot of similarities between what happens for physical incident response and what we do in the digital world. So going forward, to kind of begin to kind of align with today's talk, we're going to be looking at game days for security folks. And that means that we're going to be looking at how you can use the security chaos engineering to conduct game days. And security chaos engineering, by definition, is basically the identification of security control failures through proactive experimentation to build confidence in the system's ability to defend against malicious conditions in production. And this is kind of it's kind of a lot a lot of the definition is kind of long here, but this is a definition that was proposed by Aaron Reinhardt, which is one of the people that started thinking about security chaos engineering. And I want to introduce to you the security chaos engineering mind map. And this is a mind map I formulated. The reason being that after discussing with a lot of people, I realized that there are a couple of the understanding differs. There are a couple of misconceptions from people, and there are things that I thought can be easily presented in a way that is easy for anybody to understand security chaos engineering. And we're going to be going through this mind map in the next slides. But also, if there is this QR code, basically is a link to the Miro board where you can find this mind map. So if you want to kind of have it, you can basically go there. And I think at the end of the presentation, you also have the slides and the video recording. So if you don't capture it now, you can always get hold of it later on. All right, so what do we have in the mind map? First is the what. So what is security chaos engineering? We already talked about this, but I will just narrow it down to this very straightforward definition, which is it is the application of chaos engineering principles to cybersecurity. That is just the very simple definition of security chaos engineering. Now, who should practice security chaos engineering? I mean, why should we even practice it in the first place? This is also a question I get from a lot of people, and I do understand that cybersecurity has been around for a while, and it has gone through different phases. We have tons of security tools. We have tons of security activities. We will look at some of them later, but I think these are some of the reasons for which I think you should practice security chaos engineering. The first is you want to detect and remediate security blind spots. Now, what are security blind spots? These are basically things that might be problems that might be in your system, weaknesses, vulnerabilities that might not be detected by other systems. Now, and why do these kinds of things happen? So you know that when you are most of us, when we are acquiring security tools, you might go through different phases. You might have you might have a POC that leads to you acquiring the tool. Afterwards, the tool is being updated. Maybe your environment is also changing, maybe especially in the cloud. And after a while, there is a gap between what you see in the real world and what you expect from the tool. And at this point, the tool might not be functioning the way it was functioning before. It might not even be functioning the way it was designed to function. And that might be as a result of many factors, ranging from maybe it's misconfigured, or there is something wrong with the tool itself, or maybe the tool is missing some features from the vendors. And this leads to blind spots, which oftentimes we don't see until, if you're not very lucky, maybe attackers actually identify these blind spots and they take advantage of it. The other reason why you should practice security chaos engineering, which I will also just use the word SCE here, is so that you can move from cybersecurity to cyber resilience, or you can kind of have strike a balance between being secure and being resilient. And this is one of the I would say the most powerful benefits of practicing security chaos engineering, or SCE, because it helps you to become resilient. And the other thing is, the other reason here, so you can overcome security theater and make fact-based decisions, right? So we always have, we after some time, we have some kind of confidence about our systems, or we might have some kind of belief, right? Even when we make decisions based on these beliefs, the idea of security experimentation is for you to test whatever you think. So you don't make decisions based on what your mind tells you, but you make decisions based on what you have tested. You get evidence and you use that fact or that evidence, to make decisions. Moving forward, who should practice security chaos engineering? Yep, I think for this, generally, it is not limited, in my view, to any specific domain or subdomain of cybersecurity. So security engineers, detection engineers, incident response teams, all of these professionals can find value in practicing SCE. And most interestingly, as we will see later on, I think non-technical professionals can also be involved in practicing SCE, especially in game days like what we'll be looking at today, because it allows them to practice, the whole idea of them being able to communicate, maybe to the public, or they want to carry information and dispose it to the press, crisis management essentially, and this allows them to practice this aspect of crisis management. Where to practice security chaos engineering? This is also, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions, because maybe this is kind of something that people got to understand from the way Netflix kind of made chaos engineering popular. A lot of people feel they should practice it they should just go straight to the production environment here. But when you even look at the story of Chaos and Chaos Monkey, you will realize that it took time before they even started practicing in production. So my advice is start from where you are. You can actually start from your local environment. You can basically from there move as you get better, as you get stronger, as you have more experience. You can push your security chaos engineering test across different environments. Most importantly is that you might need to plan to get to the production, because as we know, it's very difficult for a company to have a production environment that maps directly to the staging or other non-production environments. So if you are gaining some lessons from non-production environments, and you want those lessons to be directly or as closely as possible applicable to the production environment, and so this is something that it depends on the company. You have to make sure that wherever you're practicing kind of maps or has some direct translation to your production environment. Okay, so how to practice security chaos engineering. We already touched on this a little bit. You have to start from very small basic experiments. So security chaos engineering, it's an engineering, it's all about engineering. So when you start any engineering topic, you start small. You start with your hello world. You start from your local PC. You move to non-production environments. You start from very basic experiments. So you have, like, for example, the public AWS S3. I mean, this is just an example, but I think this is like a very low barrier entry point. So you can start from there and you can build up gradually to other kind of more complex attacks. And I think that eventually you have to run some game days, because in the end you want to, in the real life, when companies are hit by security incidents, regardless of how excellent or good their tools are, at some point in time you have humans who are interacting and trying to work together to kind of contain the incident. At this point in time, you realize there's a lot of collaboration that is involved, and that is where you can enhance this whole process by practicing security game days. All right, this is at high level kind of the process flow of SCE. On the left here, you see that you have defined the hypothesis, and this hypothesis is implemented as security faults, or you can also call it security attacks. Basically, that is going to be injected into your target system, which might be anything from Lambda functions or source code to Docker images to the cloud platform, or even Kubernetes clusters. And what you're going to be observing is how those faults you have injected, how they are going to be impacting on your security controls, right? And this might range from things like preventive controls, like firewalls, to detective controls like intrusion detection systems, to corrective controls. Now, in the end, you want to see exactly how those attacks affect your security. You want to observe and understand whether any of your security attributes are being violated, right? So, for example, if you inject an attack, for example, if you think that you can detect when a new user is created in the cloud, and a new user is created and you cannot detect it, right? This is kind of a violation of your security principles, and you want to see whether you can detect it. Okay, so let's proceed. Why should we even practice game days for security? So in security, we already have a lot of exercises and of activities. I've just put a couple of them here. We have threat modeling, we have tabletop exercises, we also have some other kinds of attack simulations. Now, what is the problem with these exercises or these activities? What we talk about in security chaos engineering is we're not saying that you have to stop whatever you're doing. We are only trying to say, well, there is kind of there's going to be, you have to know what to use for what scenario, right? Security chaos engineering comes to complement all these other things, right? And there's actually a way, and we will see later on how you can kind of align security chaos engineering with whatever activity that you practice in your company. But the limitations of these systems, especially when we come to cloud systems or cloud native systems, is that a lot of these exercises are based on static resources. So I have been in my previous companies where you come together for a threat modeling exercise, and most of what you discuss is based on either a very simple use case or on resources that are not really they are not really moving. So in the end, it's not very realistic as in what you will see in real life. And even for other attack simulations, and I've played with a lot of them there. When the scenarios are easily either you create a scenario and you basically delete it or can completely wipe it out after you run it, or you run the same scenario multiple times for the same resources for the same attacks. So even if you have some lessons, even if you gain some lessons from this kind of exercises, after some time you become a master of these scenarios, and your mastery is not directly translated to the real world because you've mastered a couple of scenarios. In the real world, you might actually face some other scenarios. So you're just limited to that knowledge. And as we'll see, for security chaos engineering, the advantage is, okay, you can basically randomize all the different attacks or the security faults you're going to be injecting. You can randomize them. You can try to have it a feeling of realism, and that makes you can gain much better from running security chaos engineering. um, for example, you can also run it against an existing environment, which is something I also find out as a limitation for other tools that basically um, start when you started to deploy an environment, you train on that environment, and after that they clean up the environment. Right? This is also good, but it's limited in the sense that these resources are not changing. Very importantly, the steady state allows you to roll back to how you found the environment before you started your security chaos engineering. And then, of course, we have seen that one of the major reasons for the implementation of chaos engineering is because of the cloud, right? Netflix started it because they moved from on-premises data centers to the cloud, and they were faced with problems around resilience, and they were able to use it, and eventually they had the infrastructure was even more resilient than that of AWS. So the idea here is you can practice security chaos engineering and have higher levels of cyber resilience that can be fitted for your own organization, and it's not a function of other tools or even the underlying cloud infrastructure. It's you design it around your own specific environment, your own specific problems, and you benefit from that a lot. And we're going to be seeing more about the feedback loop in the other slides. Cool. So the feedback loop basically is just about how you can, and by the way, feedback loops are basically part of systems thinking. And for those of us that probably have been students of systems thinking, it allows you to think and to solve problems, to understand problems, to understand the root cause of problems, and to solve it and continuously, go through that loop so that you can continuously fix the problems. And I think this is one of the problems or the challenges in security today, as we see, regardless of how, all the tools we see today, all the innovation around cybersecurity, it seems the attacks are not stopping, right? The attacks keep on coming. We see big companies that are having, every kind of next generation security tool, spending lots of money on security. They are still being hacked. There's a problem in the system, and those of us that are into security chaos engineering, we think that this is a way that can actually help the industry to overcome the current challenges. So the SE feedback loop is basically 5 stages, and we're going to go through them. It's starting with planning to execution to monitoring to analyze and to acquire insights. So let's quickly go through it, starting with planning. Planning, we already talked about SE as an iterative process. So it's something that when you start, you want to continuously do it over a period of time, so that you can continuously gain and apply what you've gained in the previous iteration and continuously improve. I think it's very important for you to have a look at the principles of chaos engineering. So basically, they have spelled out a couple of things around your hypotheses, around your limiting your hypothesis, getting your aim. And this is very important because, again, for SCE, some people usually think you just do it for the fun of stressing people or breaking the system. For every SE experiment, you need to have an aim, right? You're not just doing it for fun, but you're doing it because you want to achieve an exact aim, and that aim needs to be defined, and it's part of your planning. The scope of the environment of the experiment also has to be defined. How far do you want to go? How deep do you want to go? What kind of attacks do you want to implement? This has to be well defined. And the next point here about backlogs, it's really important, especially if this is not the first time you're doing an experiment. I think it's really interesting to have a look at what you have in your backlogs. What are the problems that have been already defined by either vulnerability management teams, SecOps, DevSecOps, or SOC teams? Usually all these teams have problems. They have pain points, and in some organizations, these pain points are already documented. So during ACE, you can go there, pull out these backlogs, look at the problems, discuss with the teams, and then frame your hypothesis around this and try to kind of implement it, and see maybe you can gain something from this process. We talked about threat modeling and tabletop exercises. So I think also that, the idea of you sitting down to do a threat model or a tabletop exercise is to basically understand things like the risk appetite for your organization, to understand, the risk that you want to accept, and other things around risk. And at the end of the day, also you want to take what you've gathered in these things and maybe take a step forward by saying, well, you came to these conclusions, but how about you testing these conclusions to see exactly how it performs in practice? Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of coordination that is also involved with the management, with DevOps and SREs. I do think that it's not only a security thing, you also have to involve them, because they might have some knowledge, or when you begin to insert your attacks, it might impact them. So you want them to be to be in the loop. You want them to be informed, so that it doesn't become a bad thing, so to say. And we already talked about the non-technical staff. Also, might make sense to get them involved. So execution, basically execution is all about, all what you have planned before. You're not going to be putting it in practice. And this here, and this diagram, there's an example of kind of an attack scenario here, where you just go through it from creating a user Bob, getting the EKS clusters, and this is an AWS kind of, it's basically based on AWS. And at the end of the day, you just run through the experiment, and we will see an example very soon. And during the execution, I think one thing you must understand, safety is super important. And what I mean by safety is, firstly, the steady state usually is like, you want to understand you want to establish how the system was before you started executing, because the differences between where it was before you started and how it is during and after this experiment, you need to understand, so that you will really get the differences, and you can really observe and learn from what you'll be doing. You have to limit the blast radius, which is basically almost similar to the scope, right? How far do you want to go? What do you want to do? On well-defined systems like AWS, you can already limit it by saying, well, you want to test maybe only a service, or you want to test only a region, or you want to test only a VPC. All these logical demarcations can allow you to limit, define the scope of what you want to do, so that it doesn't affect maybe other systems or other people that are not within the scope of testing. All right, monitoring is really important, because you want to see exactly the way the what happens, the impact of your faults. On the right here, you can see an example. This is actually the AWS detective. I think a few weeks ago, they kind of released this graph, where you can actually see, based on the findings and gadgets, you can see different things, the impact of different attacks that have been detected. And this is just I would say a kind of a basic tool, and there are some other tools out there where you can either use things like logs, or some tracing tools, or some observability tools. And I think that when it comes to observability, we shouldn't limit ourselves to just pure security tools. I think I've seen a couple of tools for SREs that are really great. They allow you to see even much better, but sometimes you have to tune it to fit your own need. And yeah, you have to observe carefully, because at the end of the day, you might need to stop an experiment if maybe things are maybe going outside your blast radius, or some other teams are not happy. You have to be ready to stop experiments, so that it doesn't you don't create a negative impression before your company. Now, after the experiment has finished, you want to analyze the outcome of the experiment. Remember that before we started during the planning phase, you had your aim, you had your hypothesis, and now at the end, you collect the outcome, you collect the logs, you collect whatever helps you to have visibility, and you want to you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. For example, if you had a hypothesis at the beginning, was it proven? Did you prove yourself? Did you prove your hypothesis? Did you notice any unexpected behavior or any security events? Did you disrupt any operational or business activities? Do you derive any new knowledge? Was there anything interesting that you saw that probably you didn't know before? And things like that. There is a story. I think this was a story from Iran where they actually went to a team, and the team had the confidence that if the firewall policies are changed, they will know. Of a truth, they knew, but when the logs came, they could not interpret the logs. So they thought the logs were well documented. They thought the logs were properly organized, but they could not even read the logs to understand exactly what went wrong. And these are the kind of things that the edge cases that you will like to kind of bring to the surface. Another interesting part, you remember that we talked about risk before. So I think that in the end, a lot of what we are talking about goes back to risk. And I think that there is a lot of existing tools that can be leveraged. This one is the OWASP risk rating methodology, and it looks at a lot of things. For example, the threat agents, the attack vectors, the security weaknesses, controls, technical impacts, and the business impacts. Now, your ability to do this kind of deep analysis is very important, especially for talking to management, convincing them, talking to your CISO, talking about the next year for budgeting. At the end of the day, this is the kind of language that even the management or you yourself, like when you compare what you've done with what you've done using other tools, at the end of the day, this is the kind of analysis that brings out the differences, brings out the benefits for what you've done. So having done all of that, at the end of your analysis phase, hopefully you have some insights. You understand exactly the problems you have in your system, maybe some of the things that you arrived at during your threat modeling exercises or tabletops. It might be that it's the same. The conclusions are the same. It might be that the conclusions are actually worse off. It might be that maybe the problems are not as bad as you thought they were. So these are the kind of things you're going to be seeing at the end of that we consider as insights. And since we're talking about a loop, you might want to make some changes. For example, you might want to harden your system and try it again at another time to see whether there's improvement or whether you will still see the problems that you already identified before. So this is like an example here for some one of the experiments we did before. The idea here was that the hypothesis was if an S3 bucket is made public, we're going to be we're going to have a notification sent to our Slack channel. And when this S3 bucket was made public, we realized that, well, the notification to guard you took about 15 or more minutes. And that's already, it depends on your kind of your risk appetite. For some companies, that gap is too much because it's actually enough time for some very crafty attackers to already do damage to your system. And again, maybe the notifications to the Slack they don't arrive because maybe there is a problem or there's a misconfiguration. The immediate change here is to kind of use the S3 bucket notification events notification, which allow events immediately they arrive, all events activities against the bucket, to be sent straight off without any waste of time, because this is more proactive. So This is just a very basic example. Without doing tests, and you don't really know these edge cases, and you don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive, and that kind of drives us towards the idea of becoming cyber resilient, which is your ability to be able to to be able to contain attacks, your ability to be able to fight through attacks, to be able to survive things like ransomware, and by practicing SCE, you're able to derive this kind of advantages. Of course, you see that here is a loop, so you might factor in some of the things you found out back into your threat modeling sessions, back into your tabletop exercises to kind of discuss it more with your teams. The last one here is something that maybe might be interesting, because when you run an SE experiment, all the logs, all the information you got, they can actually be used to be fed into machine learning models, and we allow your system to be much better. Okay, so I think at this point I will just give a short demo of what we have done so far, um, so so that we can have a much better understanding. So I hope here my session expired, so I will just sign into the Mitigant system. Okay, I believe I'm visible. Okay, cool. All right, so so what we have done so far is we have a couple of attacks that have already been predefined, and basically these attacks are all designed for AWS, and they are defined for different AWS services. So let's say you want to run a ransom, you want to run a game day, and you already, based on what we discussed before, you already found out, or you want to already test specific AWS services or AWS services. We have a couple of them, and basically you can basically select a couple of those services, and let's assume you already did all what you're supposed to do. You already did the planning, you already told your teams, you already did most of what we already discussed. And because by the time you execute this, you see a plan, an attack plan here. And basically the attack plan, again, just because this is not like a simulation, this is going to be happening in real life against the attack. We're very cautious. We want to make sure that you are very serious about what you want to do. And here the attack plan just gives you a high level description of what will happen. For example, here it says that an IAM key and secret will be created with a random IAM user based on certain preconditions. So actually, if you're watching the cloud, you will see all these resources being created, just to give a feeling of reality. And then your hypothesis, here you will have to write it yourself, because we don't know what you want to test. So maybe it's just a form for you to write whatever, so it's going to be documented, and you can always come back to it and make reference to it. So a simple hypothesis can be something like, I will get some notifications from my, let me see, detection system. Okay, and then once you trigger that, it's basically connecting by APIs, and the attack is already ongoing, as you can see in this process bar. Most of the time, it doesn't take so long, because by the way, everything has been connected beforehand, and then it just connects and begins to implement the attacks. So at this point in time, if you already had some kind of monitoring system, you should also be watching it at the same time. If you had something that will tell you whether things are getting bad, you'll be watching it, basically the part, the step of monitoring. So the attack is over, and we can basically click to see the report, and the report basically just enumerates what happened behind the scenes. A couple of them you can see, like this first one here. It says it found 33 potential buckets. This attack disables S3 bucket logging, which is a best practice. You have to enable it so that every single activity against a bucket is kind of persisted, and maybe this becomes very important for forensics. So it found 33 potential buckets, and 3 buckets are exempted using tags. Then it selected one of it, then it disabled it. So one of the advantages, as I mentioned before, is if you're going to run this attack again and the next time, it's not going to, most likely it's not going to select the same bucket. It will select another one. Yeah. So this is different from when some other systems, they basically will create a bucket, they will do what you're supposed to do, and they will clean the bucket again. So you don't even have the chance of improving your system. You can't improve something that you kind of wiped out at the end of the experiment. Um, Another thing I want to show here is these attacks are basically mapped to the MITRE attack framework. As you can see here, this is the identity of the attack itself. You can also see the tactic. This is kind of defensive evasion, and the technique also. Importantly, you have the remediation here. So the remediation is, okay, what do you do to make your system much more robust, to make it not robust, to make it more secure. And here the remediation is for you um, to use the S3 event notifications, either together with AWS Event Bridge, or which maybe you want to combine with either Lambda or SQS or SNS. The idea is you want that immediately this kind of activity is happening. If an attacker comes to your account, begins to disable login against login for your bucket, you want to get notified immediately or as soon as possible, so you reduce the window of opportunity against the attacker. So then you also have the observation field here. So the observation basically is for you to write down whatever you observed, whether your hypothesis was proven, whether maybe there was a problem, maybe the blast radius was, you couldn't limit it, like whatever you think will help you the next time you're going to be running this experiment. You're going to be noting it in this form here. And maybe the last thing before I conclude is to talk about this recovery button here, and what does it do. Basically, it rolls back what it just did. So for example, this bucket, the logging will be re-enabled for this bucket, so that you don't leave any open, you don't leave any weaknesses in the system. And this is very important, especially if you are running it against a production system. I mean, even if it's not a production system, you the pain of the pain of going through this process of cleaning up. We already cleaned it up. We already returned it. To the steady state for you. So it makes it super easy for you to run experiments. All right. So of course there are a couple of statistics that might be interesting for you to kind of have a high level overview. You can see the attacks by status. You can see them by AWS services. You can see them over time, the kinds of attacks you have run. You can also see different kind of attacks, at the attack actions, and also the attack scenarios. You can see them um, on the platform, and we continue to improve. The next things that we have left, I mean, like on our roadmap, is to also connect what you've seen so far to ticketing systems like Jira, so that rather than having this rather than like writing down these observations, you can basically just open a ticket, and that ticket will be maybe assigned to maybe your security operations team, or whoever is supposed to like take care of these problems. Immediately they can remediate it, and it makes it basically to make it much easier. Okay, so I will go back to the presentation. I think here. So actually, that should be the last slide. And yep, I'll stop here. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. And I believe there will be questions in the audience. And I think I will stop now for questions. Thank you very much.